and what interested you in show business?
Well, I was raised in New York, just right outside of New York City. So the first thing I wanted to do was be in musical theater. And I accomplished that. I started out at age 14 in musical theater uh, outside the city, but then I eventually ended up doing shows off Broadway in the city. So that was my first love was theater, with comedy and musical comedy. And a lot of times that leads to doing other things, which it definitely did for me.
Excellent. Yeah. What did it end up leading into?
Television and film and commercials and other live shows. I did, let's see, where did I go from? I went to university near Buffalo, New York, at State University of New York at Fredonia to get a BFA in musical theater. And at the end of my senior year, SeaWorld water ski team scouted me because I was small and I could balance well. And I auditioned for them in Florida and they hired me. So I skied for them for a year. And at the same time, Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus World scouted me as a showgirl. I auditioned and I got that too. So that's where I learned to juggle a little bit, but my specialty ended up being the Spanish web, which is a rope that hangs from the ceiling and you spin on it by your ankle or your wrist or your neck. So that led to that. And from there, where did I go? After there, I went to, I ended up in Louisiana. I ended up in New Orleans. And it was very prolific time for me there. I ended up being in several theater companies, having a couple of theater companies, being scouted by an agent and a manager. And I did television and I did film and repertory companies. And from there, St. Louis, same thing, repertory companies. And I worked for Warner Brothers in a musical. And from there, I was off to my first time to California in San Francisco. And there I did whatever I could to, what I say, to support my performance habit. And so I love animals. I always have ever since I was a child. So I got into a veterinary hospital as a receptionist, and then they saw my abilities and they trained me to be a vet tech. And all the while I was singing at different clubs, and I did some commercials, some ads. I did an ad for a cat toy. It was like this fishing rod with a little toy on the end for cats. And yeah, I was just everywhere I went. From San Francisco, I came back to Florida and I danced at Disney. And then I got two shows at Universal. I was in the Wild West Stunt Show and I was in the Beetlejuice Rock Review. And I stunt doubled for a German television series that was shooting in Orlando and had another theater company of my own. And then where did I go? Where did I go after that? New York? Oh, no, I went back to St. Louis. That's when I did the Warner Brothers Rock Review. And then I went to New York City and back into mostly theater. Well, not mostly theater, because I was hired by one of the greatest stunt coordinators and then second unit directors. His name was Danny Aiello III. His father was Danny Aiello, and unfortunately, both of them are gone now. But he hired me to stunt double the most famous stunt woman in the world. I mean, not stunt woman, the most famous soap opera actor in the world, and that was Susan Lucci. So I did a three-story suicide, what was called a suicide fall. I imagine they don't use that anymore. I haven't been doing stunts in a while. But I fell three stories backwards off of the scaffolding when Erica was addicted to drugs. Oh, and I forgot to tell you this. You will be very interested in this. When I was in San Francisco, a call came out from Zoetrope Studios. You know who they are. If anybody else doesn't know who they are, that's Francis Ford Coppola's studio. a call for voiceover actors for a new experimental radio show, and I got hired. And he is and was the most amazing human being. He treated everyone in the cast like they were famous, that talented, and I believe we were all talented. But he treated us all so fairly and so kindly. He did not treat us like we were anything less than wonderful performers and, you know, notables in our own right. Yeah, so from New York. So, oh, and I did the Jekyll and Hyde show, which was on Sixth Avenue. They opened this reminded me of Frankenstein. They opened this three-story environmental theater, which was all based on Frankenstein, Frankenstein's monster. I played a character called January Blaze, who was the female equivalent of Indiana Jones. And it was all shows on every story and interacting with the diners and the people who came to have a drink and just, see the performers. That was really exciting. But it was the first time I ever got fired from a show because the conditions weren't great. Sorry, for the actors. So myself and a few other people wanted to bring the union in. I mean, it was New York City, the home, one of the homes, like London, of theater, and I got let go because I was fighting for it to unionize. But a year later, they unionized. So I had some phone calls from some people in the show going, thanks to you getting fired and fighting the good fight and taking one for the team, we're unionized now and we're protected. So
That's good.
yeah,
No,
that
that's a good battle for sure.
right? Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, we really did. Our dressing room was on the fourth story. It was, construction area. It was really dusty and they fed us like we were cows coming to the trough, and it wasn't great. And and it wasn't really safe. And sorry, not sorry for saying this, but sometimes things like this need to be said. And that's why I believe in helping and protecting actors. Like at first, when dry ice could be used on stage, especially raked stages, and actors were getting lung damage and smoke effects were causing lung damage and slipping and falling on the stage. And I think it's really important to protect these dancers and singers and actors who are doing sometimes really dangerous things on stage. I slid down a fire pole in the Jekyll and Hyde show from the second floor to the first floor, and stuff can happen. So yeah, so that was in New York, and then I went from New York to LA and started in doing extra work in LA just to get my feet wet. Even though I'd done television and done film before, I'm sorry, in Los Angeles, but you're an unknown. You may have worked before, but you're an unknown. So you've got to start where you've got to start. And that ended up being a few really good roles. But what I ended up doing was I really enjoyed casting. I loved the whole world of casting. So I started working as a casting assistant. And little did I know that years later, I would in Vancouver, Canada, when my former husband and I were producing television, that I would be casting our series. So you never know when something that you've done or learned previously in your life that you think, oh, I just have to do this to get by or to make a paycheck or whatever. This is never going to be useful, when it becomes very, very useful in your future life. Like being in veterinary medicine, I've cared for my animals and other animals in my family and of friends because I'm still qualified and I still know what I'm doing. Little did I know back then that that would become handy. It was a job because I loved animals, and so I did it to, as I said, support my performance habit. So LA was, I had my son there, and he carried on the legacy of being an actor in the family. He started being scouted at about age 10 months, and he never stopped working in LA. And I just kind of took a back seat, and his father was in the business. So I took a little bit of a back seat so I could just be with him all the time. And those first 3 years are so very crucial. Then, because my former was Canadian, is still Canadian, we moved to Vancouver, and our lives just exploded. My son was working constantly. I was singing constantly and working constantly. And then we did something that back then not many people were doing. A lot of people produce for themselves now, but we kind of maxed out the credit cards, produced our own pilot for a home renovation series because my husband, was very good at home renovations. We did it in LA before it became a really big thing, and then we carried it on in Vancouver. But he was also a very prolific host. So we said, let's put these two things together. And we had an entree to the VP in Canada of Home Depot, and we had an entree to Royal Bank and HSBC Bank and Global Television. And we put together a pilot geared towards them so they couldn't say no. And they didn't say no, they said yes. And they also came on to sponsor. So I spent that time producing and writing television and directing voiceovers. I'd done a ton of voiceovers before, and I got a chance to direct voiceovers, which was amazing, amazing. Then again, still being able to be with my young son because we had, a staff, and I was lucky. I would work when I wanted to, and then I would have time with my son in his early development while his dad was working, 16-hour days. And then I came back to, we were divorced, and I came back to California, and my son was still acting. He was immediately scouted by the best child agent in LA. And then he came to, and we were back and forth between the desert where we were living because my parents lived there, 2-hour drive back and forth and back and forth, but both him and me still acting. And finally he came to me and said, Mom, I just want to be a regular kid. I don't want to go back and forth. And I just want to kind of skateboard and go to school and be with my friends. I said, okay. So, the last acting performance, no, last stunt gig I did was for a television series. And then I decided it was taking a little bit longer to train and taking a little bit longer to recover. So I said, it's time to hang up that hat because I'd done, and I didn't tell you, I skied for, well, I did. I skied for SeaWorld. I was in the circus. I did stunt work, sang, danced, acted. But what I realized and what I try to impress so much on young people is that I, I realize it's difficult today because there are so many more people on the planet. And that means so many more people who are trying to get into the entertainment business. I'm not saying it can't be done. It absolutely can. You have to be really resourceful, and you have to pull at the threads like I did. So I started out as a singer, dancer, actor. I ended up as a singer, dancer, actor, choreographer for stage, singer, dancer, actor, choreographer, director for stage. Then I went into stunt work because I was a dancer. Then I was a stunt coach. And then, it just on and on and on and on. I was able to continue to make a good paycheck. And I wasn't afraid to network. And that isn't something even to this day that I absolutely relish. But I said, do you want to work? Do you want to show people you have talent? Then you're going to have to go and in person sell yourself. Now, a lot of people with the self taping for auditions, which I think is great and not so great. It's great because you can do this from the comfort of your own home and take a few times and get it where you think it's really right. But there's something about the energy of being in the audition room. And it can be super, super, super scary because sometimes sorry, casting directors, I was one. They didn't do this. They weren't looking at you. They were on the phone. They were eating a sandwich. They were talking to each other. They were looking at the other headshots and resumes, which we don't need anymore because all of it's electronic. So you're feeling a little bit like you're not being seen or heard. It's it's different things work for different people. I embrace it all. So I hung up my stunt shoes, my last stunt gig, my last singing gig. I did uh, formally about 10 years ago. I still sing, but not so much. Um, Acting, not so much. Certainly, if somebody called me and said, I want you for this film or this TV show or this commercial, this stage production, I'm there. But I did get a lot of joy out of producing and writing because I love getting people employed. I love getting people jobs. And that was kind of this really gentle, easily acceptable transition. I don't lament not falling off of buildings anymore. I don't lament not singing much anymore because I'm kind of like, I did so much that I'm ready to kind of transition into something else. And one thing I did some films, I performed in some films, but what I started doing, screenwriters started coming to me because I wrote my own television with my partners. They started coming to me asking me if I would edit and look over their screenplays. I also didn't mention it, worked for a TV and film production company at the same time I was acting in LA, and I saw all the screenplays first. I'm the one who, you know, said yay or nay, or I'd get the one pager, the two pager, the three pager, or the whole screenplay. And I'm the one who was the first bastion before it would go on after me. And I know a lot of people say they don't want the assistant. They want to go straight to the producer or the director, but that's super hard if you don't have a reputation. That's really, really hard to get that entree.
Yeah.
Now with so many streaming platforms, maybe it has gotten easier. I haven't really delved into that as much lately, but maybe it's even harder because there are so many more writers. There are so many more prospective writers, so many more people who wish to write and specifically write for television or specifically write short films or screenplays for limited series or full on film productions. Um, I am thinking that I hear I hear they're asking for material, but I'm certain that their desks, when they make that call, when Netflix or Prime or whomever, they get that message out into the world that they are inundated with screenplays and scripts but nothing ventured, nothing gained. I would never be the person to say, don't try. I'm actually, two of my long form prose poems, a screenwriter has said he'd like to turn them in collaboration with me into short films. So that's how I'm keeping my fingers in that pie, is
Yeah.
turning these into short films. And I'm excited about that because that's the way I want to show up now,
Yeah.
you know?
That's excellent. And I like that a lot. And so, a few things that you said there that I thought were really fascinating because you've done a lot of different experiences between stunts and
Decades.
Showgirl and the screenwriting and the casting director stuff. So, question I have is kind of a two-part question here is you mentioned the screenwriting thing, you mentioned the casting thing. And so as a casting director, what were you looking for when you were trying to fill roles for various shows? And then from a screenwriting perspective, what did you notice separated the great screenplays from the good screenplays?
Oh boy, that's two totally different uh, for me, those are two different topics. Let's hold on to the second one
Sounds good.
and then I'll answer your first question. It was interesting what I discovered, and I tried to be the casting director that I wanted to audition for. You know what I mean? The one who was attentive, the one who wasn't dismissive, the one who wanted you desperately to be the one, wanted you desperately to make my job easier, right? And and this is what I discovered, and maybe it's in any business. This could be a blanket statement, but I can only speak from an entertainment experience capacity, is that those who talked themselves up a lot, who maybe ran me down somewhere else at an event, at a screening, and started talking themselves up a lot, when they showed up to my audition, they weren't what they didn't deliver what they said they could deliver.
That's
That's
funny.
my experience. The ones who came in and they didn't necessarily have to be off their sides. Um, if they were, that's fine. And we could play a little bit more. I could give them direction. If they weren't, it was important that they knew the technique of the triangular technique of being able to grab the line, come back and look up, you know, and deliver it to the camera when we were videotaping them. The people who had perfected that and then were able to make it quite natural really got my attention. And sometimes somebody walked in and I was like, well, I'm looking for this look, this height, this weight, this hair color, this cultural community, person from this particular cultural community, but someone else would come in and convince me in their performance that I needed to be even more open-minded. And 8 times out of 10, they got the role. And that really helps so much. What was my pet peeve is, at that time, it was, hard copy pictures and resumes, um, when they didn't look like their headshot, when they were much older now, or their hair was completely different, or they came in with a beard and they were clean shaven in their picture. That drove me nuts. Um, I see that occasionally digitally, and still drives me nuts. When you come in, I want to see the person I saw in the picture. This is just kind of casting director 101 stuff, but it really was important for me. And the people who came in the room, and sometimes they were quite nervous, and I made sure I did my best to put them at ease and let them know, hey, you know what? You don't have to worry about me. You don't think about what you think I want. You give me what you've prepared. Okay. And if I like what you've prepared, even if it's not the direction I'm envisioning, we'll adjust. We'll have a chat about it and we'll adjust. But sometimes nerves help. I know when I would have a few nerves, but not really nervous, that worked in my favor. A couple of times I was super nervous and I got cast, but a couple of times when I was super nervous, I blew it. I so blew it. And when I thought outside the box, I thought off the page. I got cast in this stage comedy stage production, and I delivered my first line. I just I just don't know what came over me, but I decided to do it in a really quirky way. And I broke the director up and he cast me right there. But it was not on the page. But it was my interpretation of how this character, from the little I got from the description of these few pages of sides, unless I was able to go get the play, or somehow you're able to go and get the entire screenplay, not television, especially episodics. But yeah, giving me what you think your character would do. not what you think your character would do, because that's just shooting yourself in the foot. So that's your I think that's the answer to your first question in
Yeah,
long
that's
form.
perfect. No, that's perfect.
So the
And
second
yeah, the
one
screenwriting.
was
Yeah, so from a
screenwriting.
screenwriting perspective, what did you notice separated the great screenwriter, like the great screenplays from the good screenplays?
Not trying too hard, not being, especially interjecting colloquialisms when they come out of nowhere. That would get me. I'm like, where's this affectation coming from? You didn't establish this character here, but all of a sudden here. Um, Great screenplays were moved well. Um, they were tight. They are tight. Um, this is not were. They are tight. They move well. They engage you pretty early on. And I know sometimes it's very important to get exposition and background of the situation, of the characters, of the dynamic, of the location, of the era. And that occasionally will lose me when I'm watching something. It's taking you 45 minutes to even give me a clue of when, where, what, why, how, who, you know. But sometimes if I stick with it in the screenplay, feeling like I know this is going somewhere and they're dripping it out. But even in that, when they're dripping it out, they have to keep it engaging and keep giving us these little tidbits. And then when they beautifully connect that, oh, this is what was happening in the first half hour. This is what was happening in that scene, in that location. And now that little, Easter egg, that little, Mickey's head, hidden Mickey is right here. And you go, oh my gosh, I'm really glad that I hung on reading this. But yeah, I always say, um, you get a screenplay across your desk that's 140 pages, 130 pages, even 125 pages, and I would go through it and be this. You got to tighten this up. Me, the sweet spot can be around 110, 115, depending on um, if you've got a lot of establishing shots, um, if you've got more they're expressing what's happening, but there's no dialogue. It's just you're seeing the evolution. Even so, I mean, sometimes it's really engaging the way it's shot and edited. Somebody walking down this long, long road of trees, and the lighting and what they're wearing and the cadence of their step and what preceded it and what is the anticipation of what's coming next. Um, to me, that's a and well developed characters with good character arcs. But I've also seen read some screenplays that really I thought, oh my gosh, this is there. It is so there's little cohesion. It's quite disjuncted, but that was purposeful. Horror is like that a lot, and I love a good horror screenplay. Noir, thriller can be like that. Not saying that thriller isn't tight and thriller doesn't have all these other things, but this building message, this building excitation, this building suspense, isn't always pretty and neat in those genres.
Excellent.
Did that
Yeah,
answer
that's
the
perfect.
question?
No, that's perfect. That's awesome. So we got a few minutes left here. So I just got
Okay.
one final question for you. And you've mentioned some good pieces of advice kind of interwoven throughout everything, which is great. And so what I would say for my final question is just what would you say is the number one piece of advice that you have for someone who's trying to make it in the entertainment industry?
Nothing ventured, nothing gained is one of the big ones. And I still say that to myself today. If I have a goal or if I feel something percolating, something that may be an offshoot of what I've done before. Uh, no doesn't mean no forever. No is not permanent. You're going to hear so many times no, and you can't give up. I've known some younger people who, if it's not perfect the first time, forget it. And I heard no, so go in another direction. No, 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 no. Your first screenplay, your first script, even if as a writer, your first manuscript is going to get no's, just like actors, just like any performers. There are more people who do not get their first commercial or their first casting in a film or a television the first time around. That is so, so rare. You're not any different, but I'm sure there's talent in there. And sometimes when you think you're ready, sorry to say, you're half baked. So it's time to, you have to work more, you have to work harder. You need to, one of the greatest things that they did in LA, and I think they're still doing it, is going to casting director meetings. You would pay, and this was not a guarantee of being cast, but you could pay to get information and coaching from a casting director. And but oftentimes the casting director would put you in their files for, later I might have something for this person. It's the same thing with screenplays. Like I said, when I was working in the production, the film and production company, um, I would have the absolutely no in the circular file, maybe, and those usually went into a bottom drawer, and think about it, and then yes. Sometimes think about it, think harder, think harder about it, and then yes. So, if you are rejected and you get no, that's not no forever. Don't hound people. Don't become annoying. But a reminder here and there never hurts, because these people are inundated with submissions. They're inundated with the next great director, producer, writer, choreographer, dancer, singer, actor, just inundated. And so many of them won't ever be. It's just something they wish they could be, but it's just not their talent. And I always say, if you can do anything else, do the anything else. But if you cannot, you dream about this, you think about it all the time, you have it in you and it needs to come out, go for it. And that was much more than one sentence.